Welcome to the BEASTwriter podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we're going to continue my 2021 big board as it pertains to my number 6 ranked prospect. So let's get started. Now, for those who are new to subscribing to my channel, thank you for tuning in. For those who already subscribed to my channel, again, thank you to you as well. Be sure for the both of you to turn on and flip on the bell notifications so you get notified when I go live or when I upload content. Also, I'm noticing that the percentage has dropped, which is a great deal. Good job, guys. As far as my analytics are concerned, in regards to my subscriptions, it was at 83%. Now it's dropped down to 72%. So I know this is working. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and do me a solid in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as we stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. Again, there's a reason for that. Obviously, I know you guys watch all my stuff and love my content, so be sure for you, once you do subscribe and hit that subscribe button right here in the lower right hand corner of your screen, that you also turn on the bell notifications, again, so you get notified when I go live and upload content. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started and talk about Penei Sewell. Again, I know I picked up some subscribers, so I'm going to get you guys up to date and up to speed on how I like to run my podcast, as one's not unrelated to the next. They all tie in together. Alright, starting with how I run my podcast. It's broken down into 3 parameters. The first one is who are the players or coaches involved. The second parameter is why the move was made or potentially could be made, and the last but not least parameter is the instant gratification versus long-term gains. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about, well, in this case it's Penei Sewell, right? The player. He's a offensive tackle out of Oregon. So let's break it down and talk about Penei Sewell. He's listed at 6'6", 330, 335 pounds, depending on who you talk to. He started as a true freshman back in 2018, but then missed 6 games due to a high ankle sprain. The high ankle sprain is haunting NFL players, especially with the 49ers. You all know what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle, you name it. And people are saying, well, how come this player can come back faster than this player when they had the same injury? Well, it's the severity and grade of the injury, something I pointed out in an earlier podcast. See, shameless plug there. But no, in all honesty, in all seriousness, it's true. The severity does play a role. When you have 2 bones pressing against each other, and the further they spread out because of the pressure and the severity of the sprain, you're going to require surgery, or may require surgery. So some are more severe than others, which is why some bounce back faster than others. Common sense, right? But unless you don't know that, you would just be like, oh, it's a high ankle sprain, he can come back. No. People are dumb putting stuff out like that. Anyways, that's for a different podcast. But getting back to this podcast, so in 2018 he had that high ankle sprain, and then in 2019 he bounced back, had a 2019 hell of a year where he was named the Outland Trophy winner, given to the best college football lineman in college football. Best college football lineman in the college football is like being redundant, but the best college football lineman, right? And aside from that, he is the nephew of nose tackle Isaac Sopoaga, who played for who? The San Francisco 49ers. So the bloodlines run deep in his family, and that's why I know now 49ers fans everywhere are probably like, oh man, could we trade up for Penei Sewell? No. Well, you never know, right? Because what's going to happen with Trent Williams? I don't know. Anyways, getting back to Penei Sewell, what does he do well, right? What does he bring to the table? Well, he has quick feet for a blindside left tackle, right? He can get out in space. He can hit the second level with ease, taking on second level backers. He's good at reach blocking, so he does a very good job there when reach blocking. He's powerful at the point of attack, has a high football IQ. I mean, these are things that don't have to be coached up. He's basically an instant starter from day one. And aside from that, he talk about pass protection, something that right tackle Mike McGlinchey suffers with, is getting and dropping back in his depth. He sinks his hip and he always stays square, and whether it's an angle set, jump set, or vertical set, he does a very good job doing that. Now, I would say the flaw in his game, as I pointed in an earlier podcast in the comments section below, in that podcast, I said, someone asked me, hey, how come Penei Sewell is not in your top 5? He's in most NFL draft analyst top 5, but he's not in yours. How come? And it comes down to consistency in his game. I see a little bit of inconsistency in his game when it comes to pass sets. Now, I just pointed out he's a very good pass setter, but then there are flaws to that, right? And the flaw is he doesn't always keep his feet under him, allowing the edge rushers forward momentum to win. And at that next level, you can't be sloppy with your pass sets. You're going to get eaten alive. So that's something that, again, I'm nitpicking, trying to find something, but that is something that I've seen on game film over and over and over again. That could be a cause for concern for NFL teams drafting at the top of the draft. All right. So with all that being said, the most important aspect that I like about Penei Sewell's game is he's not scheme dependent. You will notice in every podcast I talk about, the reason why a player is ranked very high on my list is a factor of whether he's scheme dependent or not. You look at Penei Sewell and he's not tailored for just a power run scheme or a zone blocking scheme. He can do both. And when you're picking in the top 5, odds are that's not a good team you're going to anyways, right? So the odds of you playing under that scheme for the next 3 to 5 years under that rookie deal is not likely, because history tells us what? That there's going to be coaching turnover, right? GM turnover. And when that happens, what are you going to do with a player that's scheme dependent that's only good for a power run scheme or a zone blocking scheme? It doesn't make sense. So as an owner, you have to look at it and be like, okay, well, is this GM going to be here for the foreseeable future, or at least the 3, 5, 6, or is he not? Because if he's not, I don't want to be stuck with a high round pick who's basically damaged goods because we can't use him based on the personnel that the new coach is bringing in. Just saying. All right, but aside from that, let's get back to the podcast as it relates to where I see him playing, right? Well, I currently had him mocked in an earlier podcast and my NFL mock draft 1.0 to the New York Jets at number 2. However, that line of thinking has now changed. I have him mocked to the Cincinnati Bengals at number 5. And the reason I did that is simply because I think the Jets are going to go quarterback or wide receiver. That's just my gut feeling. But as far as the Bengals are concerned, why the Bengals at 5? Well, you take a look at guys like Jacksonville Jaguars at 1. They're going to take Trevor Lawrence, right? And then at number 2, I just said they go Devontae Smith, or they take a quarterback like Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, okay? Depending on what they do with Sam Darnold. Even if they kept Sam Darnold, they already have left tackle Mekhi Becton, so you wouldn't want to draft a offensive tackle that high to play the strong side of the formation. You want to play him the weak side of the formation. That's where left tackle money comes into play. So with that being said, I think they're out. At number 3, you have the Miami Dolphins, but they already have left tackle Laramie Tunsil. Again, left tackle money, so there's not a need there. And with Devontae Smith on the board, you can possibly have a reunion with Tua Tagovailoa, which I pointed out in an earlier podcast. And then at 4, again, I don't see them going after a left tackle. I think they're going to solidify the quarterback position, because anytime you have a new GM, a new head coach in place, you almost always, 95% of the time, draft a quarterback of the future that you're married to. All right? That leaves the Bengals at number 5. And while most people will say, oh, well, how come they're not going to select Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith to fill out on the board? Well, that's because they have Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. They drafted both those guys, and they obviously played extremely well when Joe Burrow was healthy. And when you have those 2 wide receivers there's a more pressing need along the offensive line, because what happened to Joe Burrow last year? He got knocked out of the season. Right? He got knocked out of the year. So to say that the offensive line is not more important than the wide receiver position, you'd be doing yourself a disservice. Despite Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase being higher rated on my big board, I think you have to go with Penei Sewell, because again, you look, which I'll talk about later, is the vertical board versus horizontal board. Again, you see how this is tying in and connecting the dots. Now, by drafting Penei Sewell at number 5, you're giving the Cincinnati Bengals a blindside left tackle that hasn't been seen since Anthony Munoz. And Anthony Munoz also came out of the Pac-12 playing in the playing at USC, SEC. He played at USC. So basically you're getting another Pac-12 talent, generational talent, right? And both players were considered generational talents coming out. So to me, it's a match made in heaven, where it creates a perfect storm where need meets best player available based on the vertical board and the horizontal board. So when you do that and you cross-check and you're looking at the board and be like, okay, well, yeah, Jamar Chase and even Devontae Smith would be likely and a nice trio of wide receivers that Joe Burrow can work with because he worked with Jamar Chase back at LSU. It doesn't even matter because if Joe Burrow doesn't have time to make the reads, what good is it to have Jamar Chase on the field if he can't get open? That's how you got to look at it, because games are won down in the trenches, and if you can't solidify the line on both sides of the football, you don't stand a chance in the NFL. It just goes without saying. That's a staple of and foundational core of any NFL team. You can't just draft skill players without having a solid offensive line. Just like you can't have a great secondary without a great defensive line in front of you. Because the secondary at some point is going to get beat because they can only hold for 5-6 seconds. And 5-6 seconds being wishful thinking, because usually it's only 3 to 4. But with that being said, again, think of it as backyard football, right? 1 alligator, 2 alligator. What if you had 25,000 alligators to make a read? Of course, that wide receiver is going to get open at some point. It's common sense, bro. Games are won down in the trenches, all right? So that's why I believe that the Cincinnati Bengals will target Penei Sewell, and he will be the selection at number 5. Now, I'm saying this on February 20th, 2020, but I'm sticking to that analysis unless something happens at the top of the draft where obviously draft position is affected. Alright, so let's now double down on these gains. Now I'm going to take a step further. Obviously, you guys like my bold predictions. So my top salary cap cut for the Cincinnati Bengals is going to be defensive tackle Geno Atkins. He took a back seat last year, didn't play much. It was due to the scheme, and I think he's going to need a fresh start. And with the cap savings, again, I'm looking at it from a GM perspective, you would be saving $9.5 million if you made him a pre-June 1 cut. So you cut Geno Atkins, they're already around 37 to 40 million under the cap anyways right now. You shed another 9.5 million, so let's round up and say 10 million. Now you're looking at a lot of money to be invested in possibly solidifying the offensive line. In fact, I know this is taking it a step further, but I actually did some research, and the Kansas City Chiefs, even though they were missing their offensive tackles, I wouldn't be surprised if they cut Mitchell Schwartz, the right tackle, who didn't even play in that Super Bowl. And that just goes to show how valuable Mitchell Schwartz is, but they're in salary cap hell. And if they get rid of Mitchell Schwartz and release him as a pre-June 1 cut, I can see a team like Cincinnati Bengals teaming him up and trying to target him in the draft. So now you have Penei Sewell and right tackle Mitchell Schwartz. They also have Jonah Williams from Alabama, and then you're set, right? So like, how can you not, let me just look at it to make sure, but how can you not think that that's a possible strong play, right? It is a strong play. And when you have, again, Jonah Williams was drafted the number 11th pick in the 2019 NFL draft at Alabama. So when you put it all together, now you have a line that Joe Burrow can actually work with. Now, no one's putting it out there that Mitchell Schwartz is going to be released, but he could be a cap casualty. He could be a cap casualty. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs cut ties with Mitchell Schwartz and got cheaper and younger at the position, because again, when you look at it from a decreased salary cap that just was announced that they're going to bump it up $5 million to $180 million, but it's still lower than the 198.2, you have to take that into account from a GM's perspective. I think GM Breach is on the outside looking in, and he's looking at his financial snap sheet, and based on where the Chiefs draft this year, which is obviously number 31 overall because they lost to the Tampa Bay Bucks, they have a need for an offensive tackle if Mitchell Schwartz is gone. And at 31, there's some players there that I, based on my mock draft and my big board, I see a player being available, someone like a Samuel Cosmi out of Texas, and maybe in Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama. Now, I have Alex Leatherwood, who was this year's Outland Trophy winner in 2020, mocked to the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 24 right now. However, that can change, again, based on draft position. But with all these players and surprise cuts being made, it's a depressed, how do I say this? It's a depressed free agent market because, again, the salary cap puts a stranglehold on everything. And with that, now the draft becomes a much more valuable asset because now you have to not only work against the cap, but work with a decreased cap. So these players that are trying to reset the market, it's not going to happen this year. you're going to have a Jadeveon Clowney effect. We all saw what happened last year with him. Once the market dried up, his asking price went from 20 million to 50 million to 14 million. It just kept on dropping and dropping and dropping until he got a 1-year deal with the Tennessee Titans. So we all know where this is going, guys. If you connect the dots and actually do the research, we all know where this is going, and it's not going to look good for the free agents who are coming out because of the decreased cap. It is what it is. Now, is that going to change? Time will tell. Time will tell. But again, this is why you draft Penei Sewell, because again, you're solidifying the offensive line, giving Joe Burrow time to make the proper reads, giving him a left tackle that he can work with for the foreseeable future for the next 10, 12 years, getting a generational talent, because again, left tackles don't grow on trees, and premium elite left tackles are hard to find. They rarely hit the free agent market. Now, Trent Williams could be the first. We don't know. That's why it's interesting to point out that I talked about Trent Williams earlier on an earlier podcast. See how it ties into this one, and it all makes sense as to why I'm making this move for the Cincinnati Bengals at number 5. Again, it's what I would do. It's not what I would do if I was the GM, but actually how I see the GM making this power play move with the 5th pick overall. I do believe that pick will ultimately be Penei Sewell. I don't care about the smoke screens that they're going to throw out. It's Penei Sewell all the way, and I would be absolutely shocked if the Bengals roll the dice and roll the other way and take another player. Well, that'll be it for today. I hope you liked what I had to say. If you did, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as you stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. Also, I included a Power Podcast playlist at the end of each episode, so be sure to watch that as well. You will see that, I believe, on this side. Right here. It's right here. The first one is another video, but the second one is a video and a podcast playlist for you. You can also click on the description of this podcast that you're watching, and you will know that drawing a blank. You will know that the podcast playlist is also posted there. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in again. I'll be sure to put up a second podcast later tonight. And gosh, I'm like burping right now. And as far as that podcast, I haven't really thought about which angle I want to take on that. It's going to be a juicy one. It's going to definitely raise some eyebrows. But as you guys know, I always keep it 100. I am talking to a few sources and building up on that podcast. So it should be a really, really interesting and entertaining podcast. I look forward to your comments in this podcast. So be sure to give your thoughts and analysis on Penei Sewell and what you think about the prospect and how high do you think he will go in the draft. Thank you guys. I'll be back later today. I'm going to get some lunch. I'm hungry. BEASTwriter out.